The first thing my daughter-in-law said when she walked into my kitchen was, "You're going to have to get used to having more people around." She said it casually, almost cheerfully, as if she were telling me the grocery store had changed its opening hours. I looked up from my coffee. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "My parents are moving in next month." For a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. Then she added, "They've decided your house is the best option." My hand tightened around the coffee mug. My house, not our house. Not their house, mine. I had spent 37 years working for the life I was living in that moment. After retiring, I had bought 9 quiet acres in Montana. The land wasn't a mansion, it wasn't some luxury estate. It was a modest house surrounded by pine trees, open fields, and enough space that I could hear the wind before I heard a car. It was the first place in my entire life that belonged entirely to me. And now my daughter-in-law was telling me that 2 strangers had decided they were moving into it. I didn't argue. That surprised her. She stood there waiting for resistance, probably expecting me to complain about money, space, privacy, or the fact that I had never agreed to any of this. Instead, I took another sip of coffee. "Okay," I said. Her smile became wider. "Great. I knew you'd understand." That was when I knew I had to be very careful, because she hadn't come to ask me, she had come to inform me. My son Daniel came home about an hour later. He wouldn't look directly at me. That hurt more than her announcement. Daniel had been the boy who used to sleep on the floor beside my bed whenever thunderstorms scared him. He had been the teenager who called me from a gas station at 2 in the morning after his car broke down, knowing I would come without asking questions. I had missed his graduation ceremony because I was working overtime to help pay for his first year of college. I never regretted it. But somewhere between the boy who once needed me and the man standing silently beside his wife, something had changed. I waited until she left the room. "Daniel," I said quietly, "are her parents really moving here?" He rubbed his forehead. "Dad, it's temporary." "How temporary?" "I don't know. That isn't an answer." He finally looked at me. "They're having financial problems. They lost their rental. They're getting older. We thought it made sense." "We?" He didn't answer. I looked toward the hallway. "Did you think it made sense? Or did she tell you it made sense?" His silence told me everything. I could have shouted. Instead, I remembered something my own father once told me. When someone assumes you'll surrender something without a fight, don't show them your anger first. Show them what they forgot to consider. I didn't understand those words when I was 20. At 62, I finally did. That night, I went into my study and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a folder I hadn't touched in years. The property documents, the insurance papers, the original purchase agreement, and one other document that would eventually change everything. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was afraid of her parents. I was afraid of what my own son had become willing to do. The next morning, I made a list, not of revenge, not of ways to punish anyone, just facts. Who owned the property? Me. Who paid the mortgage? Me. Who paid the taxes? Me. Who paid for the repairs? Me. Who had been invited to move in? Nobody. That last one was the most important. Still, I didn't confront them. Instead, I started preparing quietly. I called my insurance company and updated my records. I reviewed my financial accounts. I contacted an attorney I had known for several years and asked him to look over my property documents. I didn't tell him about my family drama. I simply told him I wanted everything regarding my property and estate to be clear and properly documented. Then I did something that felt much harder. I called Daniel. "Come over tomorrow," I said. "Why?" "Because you're my son." He hesitated. "Dad, if this is about the house." "It isn't." That wasn't completely true, but I needed him to come without his wife. He arrived the next afternoon. We sat on the back porch while the sun disappeared behind the trees. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, "Do you want your in-laws living here?" He stared at the ground. "I don't know. That's not what I asked." He swallowed. "No." That single word broke something inside me. Not because he didn't want them there, because he had been too afraid to say it before. "Then why did you agree?" He looked at me. "Because Sarah said if I didn't help her parents, she'd never forgive me." I leaned back. "And if you let them move in here?" "She said it was your house anyway. She said you had all this space and hardly used it." I laughed once. There was nothing funny about it. All this space, 9 acres had somehow become an invitation. Daniel continued. She said you were retired. She said you were alone. She said having people around would be good for you. I looked toward the field. Do you believe that? No. That answer came faster. For the first time in months, I saw my son again. Not completely, but enough. I asked him one more question. What aren't you telling me? His face changed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Dad, there's something else. He showed me a message. It was from Sarah. I read it twice. She had written that once her parents moved in, the house situation would be easier to manage. I looked at Daniel. What does that mean? I don't know, but he did. I could see it in his face. He was afraid to say it. Finally, he whispered, "She thinks you'll eventually put the property in my name." My stomach tightened. She thinks that? She keeps talking about how I'm your only son. I closed my eyes. There it was, the real problem. Her parents weren't simply looking for a place to stay. My property had become part of a plan. I didn't tell Daniel what I had discovered in the bottom drawer. Not yet. The following weeks became strange. Sarah started asking questions she had never asked before. How much did the land cost? Was there still a mortgage? Had I updated my will? Did I have retirement savings? Did I plan to stay in Montana permanently? Each question sounded innocent. Together, they formed a pattern. I answered almost none of them. Then, 3 weeks before the planned move, Sarah arrived with her parents. Her mother walked around the house as though she were inspecting a hotel. Her father stood outside looking over the property. "This is bigger than I expected," he said. Sarah smiled. "I told you." I noticed the way she said it. Not, "Dad, look at this beautiful place." Not, "I hope this works for everyone." I told you, as though the house had already been assigned to her. Her father asked me, "Which room will be ours?" I looked at him. "You'll have to ask Sarah." He frowned. She quickly interrupted. "Dad, he's joking." I wasn't. That evening after they left, I went into my study and made the final preparation. The document in the bottom drawer wasn't a will, it was a trust agreement. Years earlier, after my wife died, my attorney had encouraged me to protect the property from being divided through future family disputes. I had placed the Montana property into a trust. I was the trustee. Daniel could inherit from me someday. But nobody could pressure me into handing over the property while I was alive. And there was another condition. The property could not be transferred simply because someone expected it.
Lord and light, I finally understood why my father had taught me to keep documents instead of arguments.
The next morning, I called Daniel.
"I need you to come alone."
When he arrived, I handed him a copy. He read it slowly.
Then he looked up. "You already did this."
"Years ago. Why didn't you tell me?"
"Because I never thought I needed to."
His eyes filled with tears.
"I didn't know she was planning this. I believe you."
That was when he finally broke. He covered his face with both hands.
"I've messed everything up."
I sat beside him. "You made a mistake. I betrayed you. You let someone else speak for you." He looked at me. "Isn't that the same thing?"
"No."
I paused.
"But if you keep doing it, eventually it becomes one."
The following Saturday, Sarah arrived with her parents, 2 moving trucks, and several boxes. She walked through my front door smiling. "Here we are." I stood near the kitchen table. Behind me was my attorney. Beside him was Daniel. Sarah stopped. Her parents stopped. Nobody spoke. She looked at me. "What is this?" I said calmly. "We're having the conversation we should have had before you decided my house was available." Her face hardened. "Dad, what did you do?" Daniel answered before I could.
"Nothing. He just told the truth."
Sarah looked at him as though she had never seen him before. I placed the trust documents on the table.
"This property isn't being transferred to anyone. Nobody is moving in. Nobody is being added to the deed. And nobody gets to decide what happens to it except me while I'm alive."
Her mother stepped forward. "But we were told." "I know what you were told." Sarah's father looked at her. "You said this was settled." She said nothing. That silence was the first honest thing she had done in weeks. Then her father turned toward me. "I apologize." Sarah snapped. "Dad." He ignored her. "No one should have made plans for another man's property." Her mother started crying. I felt sorry for them. I really did. Their situation was difficult, but their hardship didn't give them ownership of my life. I offered to help them find a smaller rental and gave them the contact information of a local housing organization. I didn't offer them my house. That distinction mattered. Sarah walked toward me. "You've turned my husband against me." I shook my head. No. I stopped him from losing himself. She stared at me for a long time. Then she asked the question I had been expecting. What happens to Daniel when you die? I looked at my son. That depends on what kind of man he chooses to become. Daniel started crying again. Sarah didn't. She simply picked up her purse and walked outside. The moving trucks left less than an hour later. But the real damage had already been done. For several months, Daniel and Sarah lived separately. They tried counseling. They argued. They talked. They uncovered things neither of them had admitted during their marriage. Eventually, Daniel told me that Sarah had been under enormous pressure from her parents, but that didn't excuse what she had done. He also admitted something harder. He had spent years assuming that because I was his father, I would always rescue him. That realization changed him. Not overnight, but slowly. A year later, Daniel came back to Montana alone. We sat on the porch again. The same porch where he had once admitted he didn't want his in-laws living with me. He looked out over the land. I used to think this was just a lot of empty space. And now? He smiled. Now I understand why you fought to keep it. I nodded. The property never became a battlefield again. Sarah and Daniel eventually divorced. There was no dramatic courtroom victory, no public humiliation, no revenge. Just two people discovering that love cannot survive indefinitely when one person keeps surrendering their choices to someone else. Daniel remained my son. That mattered to me. But our relationship was different, stronger, strangely enough. He stopped expecting me to solve every problem, and I stopped confusing protecting my child with protecting him from every consequence. I still live on those 9 acres. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees at night, I think about that morning when Sarah casually announced that her parents were moving into my house. I remember how easily everyone assumed I would give in. They thought my silence meant weakness. It didn't. My silence was preparation. I prepared the documents. I prepared the finances. I prepared the truth. But most importantly, I prepared myself to accept something I had spent years avoiding. Sometimes loving your family means opening your door, and sometimes it means having the courage to close it, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally understood that love without boundaries can become another form of surrender. And the hardest lesson I ever learned was this: a house can shelter a family, but it cannot hold one together.